Weeks passed like slow breaths. The war did not end with a treaty or a grand speech. It ended with silence, the kind that comes after a storm when the world is too tired to rage anymore. Fortress Haven stood open, its gates no longer sealed its walls. No longer humming with shields, the humans walked out into the ash fields. Not as soldiers, but as builders, they carried shovels. Not rifles. They planted seeds in the cracked earth and shared water with Varelian scouts who once would have killed them on sight. But Chloe Bennett was not there. She stood on the deck of a small ship far above the planet, its hull patched with scavenged metal, its engines humming a quiet song. Only she understood the ship had no name yet. It had been salvaged from a derelict freighter near the outer rings and rebuilt by her hands and Lyria's patience. Inside the cabin, Lyria sat cross-legged on the floor, studying a star chart etched in light. Her golden eyes tracing paths between systems long forgotten. Kael'thar lay coiled in the cargo hold, his massive body curled around a nest of thermal blankets, his breathing slow and deep. Like distant thunder, Chloe leaned against the railing, her fingers tracing a loose wire along the console. She had spent the last 3 days recalibrating the drive core. It had been damaged during their escape from the moon station, but she had coaxed it back to life with spare parts and stubborn will. They were leaving, not running, not hiding, just moving. The Varelian High Command had fractured after the fleet rewrite. Some houses accepted the new balance, others vanished into the dark. Vowing revenge, Lyria had been stripped of her title, but granted something rarer, freedom. She was no longer a commander. She was simply Lyria, and that was enough. As for Chloe, the humans had sent messages, at first angry, then confused, then pleading. They wanted her back. They needed her. They called her a hero, a traitor, a ghost. She did not reply. She knew what would happen if she returned. They would either put her on a pedestal or in a cell. Either way, they would try to own her mind, and she would not let that happen again. So she chose the stars. The ship drifted past the last orbital beacon, its signal blinking green, a sign of safe passage. No one fired, no one challenged them. The galaxy had changed, and for now it was watching. Lyria rose and joined her at the console. Ready, she asked. Chloe nodded. The core is stable, we can jump in 10 minutes. Where to? Chloe looked out at the black sea of stars dotted with distant lights, some red, some blue, some burning with secrets no one had uncovered yet. I heard there is a system near the rim where old machines sleep. She said machines from before the Varelians, before humans, even before the dragons, the first builders. Lyria smiled faintly. You think they left something behind? I think they left everything behind. We just forgot how to listen. Kael'thar stirred in the hold, letting out a low rumble that vibrated through the deck. Chloe turned. To her, you sure about this, Lyria? Once you leave this sector, there is no going back. Lyria looked at her, then at the dragon, then at the endless dark ahead. I have spent centuries following orders. She said, now I follow something else. What? Truth, Chloe. Understood. She turned back to the console and entered the jump coordinates. The ship hummed louder. The stars outside began to stretch into lines of light as the jump engaged. Lyria spoke softly. They told me you were just a technician. Chloe did not look up. She kept her hands on the controls, steady, calm, and now, Lyria said, glancing at Kael'thar, who had lifted his head to watch the stars blur. I wonder what else you have been hiding. Chloe smiled just a little. Maybe everything. Maybe nothing. The ship vanished into the fold, leaving Elithos Prime behind, a small blue scar on the edge of a quiet galaxy down. On the surface, humans and Varelians stood together in the ruins, planting the first green shoots in 100 years. They did not know the names of the ones who made it possible. They only knew the war had ended, and the sky was clear for the first time in memory. But in the dark between stars, a small ship flew on, carrying a woman who spoke to machines, an elf who once commanded armies, and a dragon who remembered the birth of stars. They were not heroes in the old sense. They did not seek glory or songs, they sought only to understand what came next. And in that quiet pursuit, they became something new. Not human, not Varelian, not even quite mortal, but something the galaxy had not seen in a very long time. A beginning. The ship sailed on its lights dim, its path unknown, its purpose unwritten, and somewhere deep in its core, a single line of code pulsed softly. Architect online, ready, waiting for the next choice to be made. The sky burned red as they returned to the surface, not from fire but from the fleet above shifting its position. The great Varelian armada that had circled Elithus Prime like a noose now formed a wide protective ring, its weapons turned outward, toward the void, not down at the broken world below, on Kylther's back. Chloe held tight to Lyria's waist, her body aching, her mind still racing with the echoes of the station course she had rewritten the loyalty protocols, but she knew it would not hold. Forever the High Command would find a way to override it unless they acted fast. They landed in a hidden valley far from both Fortress Haven and the Varelian camp. Steam rose from hot springs, and ancient trees clung to the cliffs, their roots wrapped around stone like fingers. Kelthar folded his wings and lay down his sides, heaving from the flight. Lyria turned to Chloe, her face grim. "We bought time but not peace." "I know," Chloe said. "The High Command will send enforcers ships loyal only to the Council. They will not care about protocols, they will burn everything to reset control. Then we stop them before they arrive." How Chloe looked up at the sky, her eyes sharp with thought. "There is a relay station on the dark side of the moon. It handles all long-range fleet commands. If we take it, we can lock the override codes in place, make them unbreakable." Rhea frowned. "That station is guarded by the Silent Order. Who are they? Elite warriors. They do not speak. They do not sleep. They exist only to protect the command chain. Then we go quiet." Chloe said. Lyria studied her for a long moment, then nodded. They rested only an hour. Kelthar drank from the hot spring and ate strips of dried meat. Lyria sharpened her blade. Chloe checked her tools and built a small jammer from spare parts. By nightfall they were ready. Kylther carried them again, this time higher, faster. He flew through the upper atmosphere where the air thinned and stars burned bright below. The planet curved like a wounded jewel. The moon hung ahead, pale and scarred. The relay station clung to its surface like a metal flower, its spires reaching into space. Kelthar circled once, then dove into a shadowed crater, landing softly on black rock. "This is as close as we can get," Lyria whispered. "The station has motion sensors, heat trackers and thought scanners. Thought scanners, they read surface intentions. If you think of violence, they know." Chloe nodded. "Then we don't think, we just move." They left Kelthar hidden in the crater and climbed the ridge on foot, their steps light, their breath slow. The station rose before them, smooth and seamless. No doors, no windows, just a single archway glowing faintly blue. Chloe pulled out her jammer and activated it. A soft hum filled the air. The blue light flickered. Now she whispered. They slipped through the arch inside. It was cold and silent. The walls pulsed with soft light like a slow heartbeat. Corridors branched in every direction. But Chloe knew the way. She had studied every Varelian schematic she could find in Fortress Haven's archives. They moved fast and low. Then the first warrior appeared, tall and pale, clad in black armor. No face, no eyes, just smooth, dark glass where a head should be. It raised a hand, and the air thickened. Rhea drew her blade, but Chloe grabbed her arm. "Don't fight it," she whispered. "It feeds on aggression." She stepped forward slowly, her hands open, empty. The warrior tilted its head. Chloe thought of nothing. Just the hum of the jammer, the feel of stone under her boots, the sound of her own breath. After a long moment, the warrior stepped aside. They moved deeper. More warriors appeared, but Chloe kept her mind clear, and they passed like ghosts. Finally, they reached the core chamber, a vast dome filled with floating orbs of light, each one a command node. In the center stood a single console. Chloe walked to it and plugged in her data spike. The system woke instantly. "Welcome, Architect," it said in a voice like wind through glass. She began to work, rewriting the final layer of control, tying the fleet not to any one commander but to a shared directive. Peace through balance. But halfway through, the lights dimmed. A new presence filled the room. Not a warrior, a voice. "You dare touch the heart of our command." The High Enforcer stood in the doorway, tall even for a Varelian, his armor black as void, his eyes burning white. Rhea stepped in front of Chloe, blade ready. "You were warned, Lyria," he said. "Betrayal carries death." "She did not betray us." The Enforcer said, his gaze fixed on Chloe. "You are the human who rewrote the fleet." "I did. Why? Because your war is not yours. It is being fed by someone else. Someone who wants both our peoples gone." The enforcer laughed a dry sound like cracking ice. We have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. We do not answer to primitives. She raised his hand. The air turned sharply. Rhea cried out as invisible force pinned her to the wall. Chloe did not move. She kept typing. The enforcer stepped closer. You think your little machine can save you? No, Chloe said. I think my mind can. She hit the final key and the station screamed. Not in pain but in awakening. Every orb in the chamber flared bright, then shot outward, connecting to every ship in the system. The enforcer's eyes widened. What did you do? I gave your fleet a choice. Chloe said they can follow old orders or choose a new path. The enforcer roared and lunged, but Kael'thar burst through the dome wallstone, and metal shattered as the dragon landed between them. His wings spread, his jaws open. Fire building in his throat. The enforcer froze. You brought a beast into the sacred core. He is not a beast, Chloe said. He is a guardian. Kael'thar let out a deep rumble and lowered his head toward the enforcer. Not to attack but to challenge. The enforcer looked from dragon to human to Lyria, then he lowered his hand. The force holding Lyria vanished. You have changed things, he said quietly. Yes, the fleet is no longer ours to command. No, it belongs to everyone, no. He turned and walked away without another word. The warriors in the corridors parted for him and he vanished into the dark. Chloe slumped against the console exhaustedly. Rhea came to her side. Are you hurt? No, just tired. Kael'thar nudged her gently, his hot breath warm on her face. They stayed in the core until the system stabilized, the new protocols locked in place, unbreakable. Then they returned to the surface. The moon was quiet. The stars watched on the flight back. Kael'thar flew slower, as if sensing their need for rest. Below, the planet showed signs of change. Fortress Haven had opened its gates for the first time in months. Humans walked out into the ash fields not with weapons but with tools. And Varelian scouts met them, not with blades but with water and food. The war was not over, but it had turned back. In the hidden valley, Lyria built a small fire. You could go back to your people now, she said to Chloe. Chloe looked at the flames, then at Kael'thar, who lay nearby, his eyes half closed, and say, What that? I rewrote their entire defense system that I allied with, the enemy that I control, the fleet. They would fear you. Yes, Lyria nodded. I understand. What will you do? I will leave the command. I have no place in the new order. And Kael'thar, he goes where I go. Chloe was quiet for a long time, then she said, I have no home. Either not really. Lyria looked at her golden eyes soft in the firelight. Then come with us. Chloe smiled faintly. Wherever the stars led. Kael'thar lifted his head and let out a soft sound, almost like agreement. They sat by the fire as the night deepened around them, two women and a dragon bound not by blood or duty, but by something rarer, trust, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the greatest battles are not fought with weapons but with choices. Far above, the fleet held its ring silent, watchful, waiting, and on the broken world below, humans and Varelians began to talk not as enemies but as survivors, and that was enough for now. The silence after midnight was heavier than before. Inside Fortress Haven, the alarms had stopped, but tension hung thick in the air like smoke. Colonel Hale had been placed under watch. His access revoked, his quarters sealed. Chloe's ghost command had done more than reset the system. It had exposed his betrayal to the command staff, and now the humans were turning on each other. But Lyria knew the truth. She stood at the edge of camp, watching the distant glow of the fortress. Her golden eyes, unreadable. Kael'thar lay beside her, his tail flicking slowly like a metronome, keeping time with her thoughts. Chloe approached quietly, her boots soft on the ash-covered ground. You did not sleep, she said. No, Lyria replied. Neither did I. Of course not. They stood side by side for a long moment, then Lyria turned to face her. You are more than a technician. Chloe Bennett. Chloe looked down at her hands, still stained with grease and burnt circuit dust. I never said I wasn't. You let them believe it. Because if they knew what I could do, they would either lock me away or use me until I broke. Rhea nodded, as if this made perfect sense in her long life. She had seen many warriors, many leaders, but few who understood power the way this small human did them. Why show me, she asked. Because you have a dragon who sees truth, and because your people fight with honor even in war. Lyria almost smiled, before she could speak. A scout ran into the clearing, breathless. He bowed low and spoke in rapid Varelian Lyria's. Expression hardened. "What is it?" Chloe asked. "The High Command has ordered a full orbital strike on Fortress Haven at dawn." Chloe went cold. "They what?" "They believe the humans are developing a new weapon. Something that disrupted our networks last night. They think it is you and they want to erase us." Chloe turned away, her mind racing. She had stopped Hale, but now the entire Varelian fleet was coming down on them like a hammer on Lys. She looked back at Lyria. "You have access to the fleet command. Cozido, can you delay the strike not for long enough?" For which Lo took a deep breath for me to show them the real weapon. Lyria studied her, then nodded. "Come." They moved fast through the camp. Kelthar following close behind, they entered a tall spire at the center of the encampment. Its walls made of shifting light and memory inside a circular chamber glowed with holographic star maps and fleet positions. "This is the command nexus," Lyria said. "This is where I speak to the admirals." Chloe walked to the center and placed her hands on the interface pad. It hummed under her touch, alien but familiar. She had seen designs like this in old data cores salvaged from wrecked ships. She closed her eyes and began to work. Her fingers danced over the light keys, not typing but shaping commands like clay. She bypassed the outer firewalls using patterns she had learned from the sabotaged drone. She found the fleet control channel and inserted a loop, a false signal that showed the orbital strike. As complete, it would buy them 3 hours. Maybe 4. Lyria watched in silence, then spoke to the air in her own tongue. Her voice calm but firm. She told her superiors the strike was unnecessary, that the human threat was contained, that she had the situation under control. A voice crackled back, sharp and angry. She turned to Chloe. "They do not believe me. Then show them something they cannot ignore." Chloe said, "Like what?" Like Lyria hesitated. "Trust me," Chloe said. After a long moment, Lyria nodded. Chloe stepped back and activated a secondary protocol, one she had hidden deep in Fortress Haven's core. Not a weapon, but a demonstration. The main display above them, the image of Fortress Haven appeared. Then it changed. The shields flared not with defensive energy, but with data streams, thousands of them flowing out like light rivers. They connected to every drone, every turret, every comms node on the planet. Then the fortress spoke, not with sound, but with presence. A single pulse of coordinated energy, shot into the sky not to attack, but to show every Varelian ship in orbit flickered as their system synced for 1 second to the human network. Then it stopped. The chamber was silently. Rhea stared at the display. Her breath caught. "You control it all," Chloe said softly. "Not just the fortress, the whole battlefield. Every machine that runs on code listens to me because I built the language." "They speak, Lee." Rhea turned to her eyes wide with something like awe. "You are not a technician. You are the architect." "Yes, and you have been hiding this from everyone. From my own people, too." "Why? Because power like this scares people. They would rather destroy it than understand it." Lyria was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to the far wall and touched a symbol there. The chamber sealed, the light dimmed. "You could have taken the fortress from the inside," she said. "I could have. But you didn't now. Why? Because war is not the answer." Chloe said, "Not when both sides are being played." "Played?" "Yes, someone wants us to destroy each other. Someone who benefits from the chaos." Lyria frowned. "Who? I don't know yet." But Hale was just a piece, not the player. Kelthar let out a low rumble from the doorway. His eyes fixed on Chloe as if seeing her for the first time, not as a human, but as a force. Lyria walked back to her and placed both hands on Chloe's shoulders. "Listen to me carefully. If I bring you before the High Command, they will kill you on sight. I know, but if I do not, they will glass this world and everyone on it." "Also true. So what do you suggest?" Chloe met her gaze. "Take me to the orbital command station." Lyria blinked. "The what?" "The station above us. It controls the fleet. It runs on the same architecture as Fortress Haven. I can get inside. I can shut down the strike order for good. It is heavily guarded. Snow, and it is filled with Varelians who hate humans. I know you will die." Lyria searched her face for fear but found none. Only quiet resolve. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone has to stop the real enemy, and right now, I am the only one who can see the whole board." Kelthar stepped forward and lowered his head toward Chloe as if offering his back. Lyria looked at her dragon, then at Chloe. You are either very brave or very foolish. Chloe smiled a little. Maybe both. Lyria nodded. Then we go. At dawn, they prepared in silence. Lyria gathered stealth gear and forged clearance codes. Chloe modified a data spike she had hidden in her boot. A tiny device that could rewrite system permissions in seconds as the first light touched the ash plains. They stood at the edge of Camp Kael'thar, crouched low. His wings spread. He will carry us, Lyria said. The station has a blind spot in its sensors near the waste exhaust port. Chloe climbed onto the dragon's back behind Lyria, her arms gripping the elf. Woman's waist hold on Lyria, said Kael'thar, launched into the sky so fast the ground vanished in a blur. The wind screamed past them. The cold bit through their clothes, but Kael'thar's body radiated heat like a small sun-below fortress. Haven looked small. Fragile Chloe closed her eyes and whispered a command into her wrist comm. A final check on the fortress core. It responded instantly, steady and strong. She was ready. The station loomed ahead. A massive ring of metal and light spinning slowly against. The Black Ulthar dove toward the exhaust port. His wings folding tight at the last second, they slipped inside just as the patrol drone swept past. Inside it was dark, hot, and loud. They landed on a narrow catwalk, steam hissing from pipes overhead. This way, Lyria whispered, leading them through a maze of corridor. Schlo mapped the layout in her head, comparing it to old schematics she had studied in secret. They passed 2 guards. Lyria disabled them with silent precision. No killing. Just sleep. Finally, they reached the central core. A vast chamber filled with glowing columns of data and floating control orbs. This is it? Lyria said. This is where the strike order is held. Chloe walked to the main terminal and plugged in her data spike. The system recognized her instantly, not as an intruder but as a creator. Access granted. The voice said in perfect Englishly. Rhea stared. Chloe began to type, not with her hands but with thought. The spike translating her will into code. She didn't just cancel the strike order, she rewrote the fleet's loyalty protocol. From now on, the Varelian ships would answer not to the High Command but to a new directive. One that prioritized peace over conquest. It was done in less than a minute. But as she pulled the spike free, alarms blared, red lights flashed. They knew. When Lyria shouted, they ran back through the corridors, but the station was awake now. Doors sealed. Drones activated. Kael'thar roared from the exhaust bay, shaking the walls. They fought their way back, hissing steam and flashing blades. Lyria moved like a storm. Chloe stayed close, her mind racing. At the bay, Kael'thar was waiting, blood on his scales, but his eyes fierce. They climbed on, and he burst back into the sky just as the station fired its defense cannons below. The fleet began to shift, not toward Fortress Haven, but away, forming a protective ring around the planet. The High Command was screaming over every channel. But it was too late. Chloe had already changed everything, and Lyria looked at her, not with fear, not with anger, but with something new: respect. Maybe even hope. They flew toward the rising sun, 2 women and a dragon carrying the weight of a world on their shoulders. And the war no longer belonged to those who started it, it belonged to those who dared to end it. Chloe woke to the sound of wings and the sharp buzz of drones or the distant thunder of artillery. But something deeper, smoother like wind moving through ancient trees. She opened her eyes and saw Kael'thar perched just outside the pavilion. His massive head tilted as he watched her through the energy wall. His eyes glowed faintly violet in the dim light of early dawn. Lyria entered moments later, dressed in a long silver robe, her golden eyes sharp, but less hostile than before. You slept well? She said, not a question. Chloe sat up slowly. My back hurts, but yes. Good. Lyria gestured to the entrance. The wall of light dissolved into mist. You will work with us today? Chloe blinked. Work? A Varelian scout drone was damaged in last night's skirmish near your fortress. It crashed in the ash flats. Its core is unstable. If it detonates, it could wipe out our forward sensors for a week. And you want me to fix it? You understand human tech better than my engineers do. Lyria said simply. They see machines as tools. You see them as living things. Chloe almost laughed but stopped herself. She was led through the camp past rows of silent warriors and humming energy spires. The air smelled of ozone and something sweet, like crushed petals. They reached a large open area where a twisted piece of metal lay smoking in the center. It was a Varelian scout, sleek and organic in design, its surface covered in glowing veins that pulsed weakly. Chloe knelt beside it, and ran her fingers over the casing. She felt the rhythm of its failing systems, the stutter in its power flow. It's not just damaged, she said quietly. Someone tampered with its command node. Lyria stiffened. Who would do that? Your own people, Chloe said without looking up. This was sabotaged. From the inside, Kael'thar let out a low growl from where he lay nearby, his tail curling tightly. Rhea said nothing for a long moment, then nodded. Proceed. Chloe pulled tools from a kit handed to her by a silent guard. She worked fast. Her hands sure and steady, she opened the drone's access port and found the problem: a corrupted data crystal lodged in the primary relay. It had been forced in wrong, on purpose, designed to overload the system. As she worked, she noticed something else the drone used. A frequency band very close to one she had coded into Fortress Haven's defense grid. A band only she knew about. That was no accident. Someone in the human command had leaked her protocols. Her stomach twisted, but she kept her face calm. She replaced the crystal with a clean one from her own kit, one she had made weeks ago just in case. She reset the core and watched as the veins on the drone's surface brightened back to life. It hummed softly, then lifted a few inches off the ground. Lyria exhaled, as if she had been holding her breath. Well done. Chloe stood, brushing ash from her knees. It will hold for now, but that's sabotage. It was precise, professional. You think a human did it? I know a human did it. Lyria studied her, then turned to Kael'thar. The dragon rose and patted over his massive head, lowering so Lyria could rest her hand on his brow. They seemed to speak without words. After a moment, Lyria looked back at Chloe. You will stay with us longer. Chloe didn't argue. She knew running was pointless, and besides, she needed time to understand what was happening inside Fortress Haven. Over the next 2 days, Chloe was given a small tent near the edge of camp. Not a prisoner, but not free either. She ate with the scouts, drank their strange tea, and watched how they moved, spoke, and fought. They were disciplined, elegant, almost ritualistic in everything they did, and always Kael'thar was near. The dragon followed her on her short walks around camp. He sat outside her tent at night, his eyes watching her through the thin fabric. He never threatened her, but his presence was constant, heavy like a storm waiting to break. On the third morning, Lyria found Chloe examining a broken comms relay. You are curious, she said. Chloe nodded. Your systems are beautiful, but flawed. Lyria raised an eyebrow. Yes, Chloe pointed to a junction in the relay. Your encryption is strong, but your signal routing is inefficient. You send data through 3 layers when one would do it. Makes your network slower and easier to jam. Lyria was silent a long time. Then she said, show me. So Chloe did. She spent the next few hours reworking the relay using spare parts and her own logic. She bypassed the extra layers, added a feedback loop to detect interference, and tied it into the scout drones for real-time updates. When she finished, Lyria tested it herself, her fingers dancing over a holographic interface, her eyes widening slightly. This is remarkable, she said. It's basic engineering, Chloe replied, but she allowed herself a small smile. That night, Lyria invited her to sit by the central fire, the first time a human had been allowed near it. The scouts watched but said nothing. Kael'thar lay beside them, his warmth like a furnace. You are not like other humans, Lyria said, after a while. How so? You do not boast, you do not rage, you solve problems as if they are puzzles, not battle. Chloe looked into the flames. We don't have the luxury of rage on Elithus Prime. We fix what we can and hope it holds. Lyria nodded slowly. Then, she asked, who betrayed you? Chloe stiffened. I saw your face when you found the sabotage. She said you knew who did it. Chloe was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke softly. There is a man in Fortress Haven, Colonel Hale. He never liked that. A technician. Had access to the core systems. He called it a security risk. Maybe he decided to prove himself right, or maybe he works for someone else. Lyria said. Chloe didn't answer, but the thought chilled her more than the ash wind. The next day, Lyria gave her access to a larger workshop filled with captured human tech and Varelian components. Together, they began rebuilding a command node for the Scout network. Chloe suggested changes. Lyria approved them, and slowly, a strange rhythm formed between them. Human logic met alien intuition, and Kelthar watched it a lone evening as Chloe adjusted a power coupler. The dragon stepped close enough that his breath stirred her hair. She froze, but he only sniffed her tool belt, then nudged her hand with his snout. "Wanted the wrench?" She handed it to him carefully. He took it gently in his teeth, then placed it back on her belt with a soft chuffly. Rhea, who had been watching from the doorway, smiled faintly. "He has chosen you." "Chosen me for what? To be seen." Chloe didn't understand, but she felt something shift in the air like a door opening. Just a crack later that night, she lay awake listening to the distant sounds of war and the steady breathing of the dragon outside her tent. She thought of Fortress Haven, of Colonel Hale and the hidden backdoors in the system she had built. If Hale had her codes, he could shut down the entire defense grid with a single command, and if he was working with the Varelians or worse, with a third party, she sat up. She had to get back, but not yet. First she needed proof, and she needed to know if Lyria could be trusted. The next morning she found Lyria training with a blade in the practice yard. "I need to send a message," she said. Lyria lowered her weapon. "To whom?" "To Fortress Haven. A coded burst on a frequency only they monitor." "Why?" "Because if my suspicion is right, someone inside is feeding you false data. Not just about drones, but about troop movements. Shield strength. Everything." Lyria's eyes narrowed. "You think this is a trap?" "Within a trap, yes." The elf woman was silent. Then she nodded. "Do it." Chloe used a modified relay she had built from scraps. She sent a short pulse, a simple string of numbers that meant nothing to anyone but her and the AI core in Fortress Haven. 3 hours later the reply came. It was garbled, but she recognized the pattern. Colonel Hale had rewritten the authentication key. She was locking her out and preparing to hand control to someone else. Chloe turned to Lyria, her face pale. "They are going to disable the shields tonight." Lyria went very still when midnight. The elf woman turned and shouted orders in her native tongue. Scouts moved fast. Kelthar rose with a rumble, his wings spreading. "You are sure?" Lyria asked. Chloe met her gaze. 100%. "Then we stop them." "But how?" Chloe said. "We are miles from the fortress." Lyria smiled, a cold, sharp thing. "You built their systems. Yes, then you can break them from here." Chloe stared at her, then at the relay, then at her own hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I can." She began to work faster than she ever had before, rewiring the relay, tying it into the Varelian network, using their power to boost her signal. She wrote a new code, a ghost command that would slip past Hale's locks and speak directly to the core. Kelthar lay beside her, his heat keeping her hands from shaking. Lyria stood guard, her blade ready as the clock neared midnight. Chloe sent the command. For a long moment nothing happened. Then deep inside Fortress Haven, alarms began to blare. The shields flickered but held, and the defense grid went dark for exactly 7 seconds, long enough for Hale's override to fail, long enough for the AI to recognize Chloe's signature and reset all protocols. It was done. Chloe slumped against the workbench. Exhaustedly, Rhea placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved your home?" Chloe shook her head. "No, I just bought us time, but for the first time." Lyria looked at her, not as a prisoner, not as a technician, but as something else. An equal. Kelthar nudged her again, this time with something like approval in his glowing eyes, and Chloe knew the real war was just beginning. On the cracked plains of Ilithus Prime, the sky never cleared. It hung low and heavy with ash from burning cities and shattered orbital stations. The air tasted like rust and regret. Fortress Haven, the last human stronghold on the continent, stood like a broken tooth against the storm, its walls scarred by plasma fire, its towers flickering with failing shields. Inside, the corridors buzzed with exhaustion and fear. Soldiers moved in tight groups. Their armor dented their eyes. Hollow technicians scurried between junction boxes and drone bays, trying to keep the lights on and the guns loaded. Among them walked Chloe Bennett, small, slight, and quiet. She wore a grease-stained jumpsuit 2 sizes too big and carried a tool belt that clinked with every step. No one saluted her. No one even looked her way. She was just another pair of hands fixing what others broke. Chloe didn't mind the silence. She preferred it. In the early days of the siege, she had spoken up once during a strategy meeting, pointed out a flaw in the outer sensor grid that would let enemy scouts slip through unnoticed. The colonel had laughed and told her to stick to tightening bolts. She learned fast after that. Keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and keep working. That became her rule, and it worked for months, but tonight was different. A distress signal had crackled through the comms an hour past midnight. A recon drone had gone dark near Sector 7, the same drone Chloe had personally upgraded with stealth. Plating and long-range optics, she knew its every circuit, its every weakness, and she knew if it failed, it wasn't just a machine lost. It was eyes gone blind in the dark. She volunteered before anyone else could be ordered to go out there. The duty. Officer barely glanced up from his screen. "You sure, Bennett, you're not combat trained? I built that drone, sir." She said simply, "I know how to reboot its core if the power cell froze." He shrugged and stamped her clearance pass. "Don't. Take more than 2 hours, the gate closes at 300 sharp." She nodded and walked to the armory where they gave her a sidearm she'd never fired, and a thermal cloak that smelled like mildew outside the main gate. The wind howled like a wounded animal. The ground trembled faintly from distant artillery fire. Chloe moved fast and low-sticking to the ruins of old supply depots and collapsed watchtowers. Her boots crunched over glass and bone. She didn't look down, she never did. Sector 7 was a graveyard of broken machines and half-buried vehicles. The drone lay on its side near a crater. Its wings snapped, its lens cracked with frost. Chloe knelt beside it and popped the access panel with her thumb. The internal temp read, -40. The core had shut down to preserve memory. She pulled a heat pack from her belt, slapped it onto the battery, and waited. As she waited, she scanned the horizon. Something moved. Not wind, not debris. A shape gliding between the ruins, too smooth, too silent. For human movement, Chloe froze, her breath caught in her throat. Then came the sound, a low hum like a tuning fork struck in deep space. Varelian scouts. They'd been watching. She reached for her sidearm, but knew it was useless against their phase rifles. She thought of running, but her legs wouldn't obey. 3 figures emerged from the smoke. Tall, slender, their armor shimmering like liquid silver. Their faces hidden behind smooth white masks that reflected the dying stars. They carried no visible weapons. Yet Chloe knew they didn't need them. One gesture and her nervous system would shut down like a tripped fuse. The lead scout tilted its head as if listening. Then it spoke, not with sound, but inside her skull, a voice cool and clear as mountain. "Water. You are alone." Chloe didn't answer. "You are unarmed." Still, she said nothing. The scout stepped closer, its mask retracting to reveal a face that stopped her breath. Pale skin, high cheekbones, eyes like twin pools of liquid gold, ageless, and sharp with intelligence. This was no grunt. This was command. "I am Lyria Valen," the woman said aloud now, her voice musical but edged with steel. "And you will come with us." Chloe's mind raced. She thought of the drone, the heat pack, the hidden data chip inside its core that held encrypted logs of Varelian fleet movements. She thought of Fortress Haven and the thousands sleeping behind its walls. She nodded slowly. "I have no choice." Lyria smiled faintly. Wise, they bound, her wrists with light cuffs that didn't hurt but sent a dull numbness up her arms. They led her away from the drone. Chloe glanced back, once hoping the heat pack would do its job before the core corrupted. The journey to the Varelian forward camp took less than an hour, though it felt like days. They moved through tunnels of hardened light that bent space itself, stepping out into a clearing where a dozen more scouts stood at attention around a central pavilion made of woven energy and living. Crystal at its center coiled a creature that made Chloe's heart stop, a dragon. But not like the ones from old Earth stories. This one was sleek and massive, its scales shifting between deep violet and silver. Its eyes glowed with inner fire, and its wings folded like folded star charts. It lifted its head as they approached and fixed its gaze on Chloe. Lyria placed a hand on its snout. "This is Kael'thar," she said. "He does not take kindly to strangers." The dragon sniffed the air, then let out a soft rumble, almost like a purr. Lyria frowned, curious. They brought Chloe into the pavilion and seated her on a low stone bench. A guard stood at each entrance, but Lyria dismissed them with a wave. "So," she said, circling Chloe like a hawk. "A human technician out past curfew fixing toys in a war zone. Tell me why I should not execute you as a spy." Chloe kept her voice steady. "Because I'm not a spy. I'm exactly what I seem, a technician. Then why were you alone in a kill zone? Because no one else knew how to fix that drone." Lyria paused. "You built it. I helped design its neural net." "Yes." The elf woman's golden eyes narrowed. You are young for such work. Humans don't live long. Chloe said simply, we learn fast or we die. Lyria studied her a long moment, then gestured to a tray of water and fruit. Eat. Chloe hesitated. But hunger won. She took a piece of fruit. It tasted like honey and lightning. Your fortress is failing, Lyria said casually. Its shields flicker, its power grid sags under load, your soldiers are half-starved and your command is divided. Chloe said nothing. Yet you send a lone technician into the dark to recover a broken machine. Lyria leaned forward. Why? Because if that drone dies, we lose our only eyes on your eastern flank. Chloe met her gaze. And you know that? A flicker of respect crossed Lyria's face. Perhaps you are more than a wrench-turner. Perhaps Kael'thar shifted outside, letting out a low growl that vibrated through the floor. Lyria stood. Rest here, you will not be harmed unless you try to run. The guards returned and sealed the entrance. Chloe sat alone in the soft glow of the pavilion, her mind racing not with fear but with plans. She thought of the hidden protocols in Fortress Haven's systems, the backdoors she'd coded into every drone, every turret, every comms relay. No one knew she'd built them to be controlled from a single point, a point only she could access, and now she was behind enemy lines. She closed her eyes and listened to the hum of alien tech around her, already mapping frequencies, identifying weaknesses. They thought she was just a technician. They had no idea outside. Kael'thar watched the pavilion, his eyes never leaving the spot where Chloe sat inside the dragon's tail, flicked once slow and thoughtful, as if it too sensed something unusual in the small human, who smelled not of fear, but of quiet fire. Chloe opened her eyes and looked at the wall of light sealing her in. She smiled faintly. Let them think she was harmless. By the time they learned the truth, it would already be too late.